On today's episode, I'm chatting with Peggy Toth, the Program Manager for Logistics Integrated Information Solutions Marine Corps. For those of you who haven't heard of LI2S Marine Corps, they deliver and sustain logistics information technology solutions to enable Marine Corps logistics operations across the enterprise. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you on. I personally don't know a lot about LI2S, so I'm excited to learn more.
Great. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right in. Tell me a bit about LI2S's mission and what your role is as the PM.
LI2S stands for Logistics Integrated Information Solutions, and there's actually an MC at the end of that, Marine Corps specifically. We were the program office formerly known as PMGCSS Marine Corps, but my predecessor recognized that a lot of the work going on had previously been to sunset and go into a single GCSS system, but time and technology sort of rendered that path not the best path for the Marine Corps. And there were a lot of other drivers there as well. So our mission, we support the logistics community writ large, operational, supporting establishment, and everywhere in between. My role as the PM is manyfold.
Depends on the day.
Exactly. From an acquisition standpoint, I need to make sure that our teams have the resources that they need, specifically for logistics. So everywhere from requirements, and that translates into what are we delivering now and what needs to be enhanced, improved, or replaced. Are we adequately funded to do it?
A big part of it.
Exactly. Is there another capability program office that we need to reach out to, either for us to become their customer or for them to become our customer, because we're more and more looking at fully integrated or interoperable systems in order to achieve the overall Marine Corps mission in the logistics arena. As an organizational leader, my role is to make sure that our workforce has what they need to do their job, but also that we develop and mature as an acquisition organization in a brave new world. So a few years ago, DoD approved the Adaptive Acquisition Framework with little to no implementation guidance. I see that as an opportunity. In other words, until Department of the Navy or Department of Defense develops actual definitive guidance and rule books and that sort of thing, it's entirely within our ability to determine how best to execute, to deliver, to be accountable, to our customers accountable, the Department of Defense, as we execute. And then, as guidance comes in, then we can contribute, hopefully, from a place of experience. And so that as that develops, we become part of shaping the future.
Kind of a create your own adventure for
absolutely, yeah,
acquisition
absolutely.
framework.
Yeah. So, we proceed until apprehended, right? Until somebody tells us we're doing something wrong, we need to execute.
For those of us who don't know, GCSS Marine Corps, what does that stand
for?
That's the
Global Combat Support Systems. Marine Corps specifically goes back to the legislation, I want to say in 2002, 2003, that established GCSS for each of the services. Now, the other services implemented their own version.
Okay.
And GCSS Army exists, and it's a similar program, it's a different basis than ours is. But the intent was to have a single system to support Marine Corps logistics, period. And I mean a single system, one interface, one backend. And it was to replace many existing applications at the time. I don't know what the count was. Acquisition being what it is, things take time, and it's a very complex system. Of the 20 plus requirements that were in the original capability development document, a subset were delivered through GCSS. They called it Increment 1. Were delivered, are in sustainment, continuous improvement, et cetera, but the remaining requirements are still pending and valid from what we understand from the requirements community. To get back to your question, so GCSS was intended to be the system to replace everything else. So that's maybe going into another one of your questions. Where we're going as a program office is re-looking at all of those requirements having been revalidated and saying, all right, what is still missing? And, what maybe we can incorporate through a single interface without having a single system. Again, time and technology moved on. You don't necessarily need a single system for one user to have all of the functionality that they need.
You just need the front-facing piece where everyone can see it.
Exactly,
yes.
exactly.
Okay.
And the things that we call interface control documents. So that's an agreement, say, between me and one of the portfolio for logistics systems to say, well, commander and the supporting establishment needs this kind of report, and the supply and maintenance end of it comes from the GCSS backend. The other piece comes from an LCES backend, but the commander is seeing a single interface with the information he or she needs.
Do you think in the future it would be a DoD-wide GCSS system, or would that be helpful or not necessarily?
I'm sure that it would be very useful to have a department-wide capability. Technologically speaking, I think it could happen. There would have to be a lot of re-engineering and redesign and actually agreement on specific requirements. What do we call X data element? How is a certain result calculated? For legitimate reasons, doesn't necessarily happen uniformly across the services. Yeah. So that would be very large, very expensive, and a very, very long-term program. Yeah.
LI2S Marine Corps was initially part of another program office, but now it's PEO MLB. Can you talk about
So we were
the history?
So we were actually first aligned to PEO EIS, which was the PEO for the Enterprise Information Systems.
Okay.
I'm not sure when it was established, but PMGCSS was aligned to a PEO several years ago because of its status as an Acquisition Category 1 program.
Okay.
Right. Various regulations required that alignment, and Marine Corps Systems Command, for various reasons, felt that the capability swim lane, that is an information system, made more sense to align to PEO EIS, which is outside of Marine Corps Systems Command.
Yes.
So PEO EIS's mission evolved and grew over time. And it was already in the works when I came to the program. I came in 2020 as the deputy program manager. And so the establishment of a PEO MLB was already underway at that point. So PEO EIS not only had the Marine Corps, GCSS Marine Corps, but also had the engine, the programs that preceded what are now aligned to PEO Digital. And that's all the network sustainment and user devices and those services that basically allow us all to work in an information environment. And so the dollar values, the scope of the PEO EIS got to the point where it made sense to establish a second PEO to cover what we loosely call the business systems. And so those are not necessarily what you normally think of as systems to be used in the fight, right? So the targeting systems, the command and control systems, and all that. So none of those types of systems are aligned to PEO MLB, but the ones that take care of pay, personnel, supply and logistics, supply and maintenance, and that sort of thing are aligned to PEO MLB. And then, of course, the Navy has many, many programs that provide those capabilities as well. So, in the long term, the potential for naval integration should be an end result of the PEO having both services within her control.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we talked about the background of LI2S. Can you talk about the different portfolios within it? I believe there's 3 main portfolios in LI2S.
We do. We have 3 portfolios, and they're aligned under product managers, PDM. So if I say PDM, that's what I'm really referring to, the portfolios. So one is for GCSS, the system, right?
Okay.
And within that, PDM's responsibility is not only sustainment of the system, making sure that it remains up and viable, et cetera, but is also responsible for adding capabilities or improving capabilities. For instance, within this last couple of fiscal years, we were able to make GCSS existing functionality more available in disconnected and disadvantaged environments. So we fielded, and they give varying degrees of GCSS capability, from email mobile query. I can send an email that simply says schedule in the subject line, no other text. Okay. And GCSS will return what my work schedule is for the day.
Pretty smart.
in maintenance. Exactly. Yeah. So if all you have is email, you can keep working. You don't need to have a live and continuous connection to GCSS Marine Corps. A big problem over the years has been the availability of GCSS shipboard, because GCSS, it's a web-based system, if you will, right? You still have to have an active URL to do the transactions. It's a lot of data moving over the pipeline, and shipboard would experience quite a lot of issues with timeouts and bandwidth and everything else. And so we're, over the next couple months, going to deploy something that we call DDIL log. DDIL stands for Denied, Degraded, Intermittent, and Latent. Marine Corps Logistics basically puts an edge server out on ships that terminals can interact with shipboard, and then as comms are reestablished with GCSS, then the update to the system happens.
It'll push the update.
Exactly. But there's minimal. Well, let me back up a little bit. So there were 13 essential GCSS Marine Corps functions that this makes sure the person can actively work shipboard if they come across a break in comms.
Okay.
Right. And then the sync happens between the edge servers and GCSS when comms are reestablished. And then, of course, that team is the one that's been most directly involved in Marine Corps audit, because
I was going to ask you about that. We're all talking about it.
Yes, audit is a big part of our life. So GCSS Marine Corps, because one of the things that it does is order repair parts, has financial information. So it doesn't do financial transactions, but it processes financial data. In other words, a unit has $25,000 this quarter for parts or whatever. As they order parts, their available dollars are decremented. And then, so
they can
money
see where they're
actually,
at.
Right. Yeah. Money doesn't actually change hands. So, but because it does provide information to financial management systems, it's considered a financial feeder system. And therefore, it is audit relevant. That's another phrase we use a lot. It's very much so an audit relevant system. So the auditors have looked at everything having to do with GCSS, everything from, are we properly documenting why we give a user permission? Even if that user has read-only permission, there are certain specifics that need to be in their access request. So this is why this individual needs this level of access. Here's the transition. It aligns to their position description or their role, and all that's good to go. It's understandable, and it's checked at least annually. Yeah.
If you have an account, it's checked?
It must be checked. It has to be verified at least once annually, and there's, are we deactivating on time, all that other kind of stuff. And the other thing that we have is something called segregation of duties, right?
Yes.
I cannot be the same person who orders and approves an order.
Kind of like with a purchase card.
Exactly, exactly, because it is a conflict of interest. And that was very challenging. So we need to make sure that GCSS is a fully auditable system. And that has caused us to have to, working with the Marines out in the fleet, challenge some of the practices that they had to have in place, because they don't necessarily have enough Marines to be able to segregate those duties, particularly within Marine Forces Reserves. It was a significant challenge that we worked, and we accepted as much risk as we legally could.
When you're giving authority within GCSS Marine Corps creating accounts, is it certain MOSs or job categories that are allowed to use it? Or is it only for loggies, or is it?
That's a local command decision.
Okay.
Right. So we don't actually authorize. We receive the SAR. The commanding officer responsible has given his or her stamp of approval, and based on that approval, the folks that actually manage access on the other end say, yep, the form is in order. It has the right signature on it. Therefore, you have access.
Okay.
We as the system managers don't make that decision. We are putting more automated processes in place, in other words, to flag segregation of duty issues, so that there's not a delay and there's not, we reduce as much as humanly possible the potential for
an error.
An error. Yeah.
Should we talk about the other focus areas?
Sure. Let's talk about the other focus areas.
So we talked about GCSS Marine Corps.
Right. So we also have PDM, Digital Environment and Integration. We loosely refer to those as the enterprise logistics systems. And those are supporting establishment. Those are the back office ones. So that group was initially set up specifically to move out on cloud enabling some of the very old, and I'm talking mainframe logistics applications, and getting them modernized in a cloud environment. Those 11 mainframe systems were all updated and modernized into what we call now the Technical Data Management, TDM. Right. And actually, Marine Corps Systems Command is one of our major customers. As a capability, as a piece of equipment is fielded, updated, etc., the technical data about that equipment is also updated. So you can imagine in a mainframe and old paper-based documentation scenario, the technical data was often far behind the equipment itself. Whereas now, as soon as the program office fielding some gear fields that gear or is approved for fielding, that technical data is absorbed into TDM. So when a unit receives data, they should have immediate access to their technical data.
Which is very helpful.
It's very helpful. There's a cataloging piece to that, which gives you access to the NSNs, et cetera. And there's also a publications piece. So your maintenance manuals, if there were recalls, things like that, all of that is available pretty much as soon as we can absorb it into the system.
Okay.
From what I understand, so that's called TDM pubs. The rest of the capability is called TDM Catalyst.
I was about to ask about Catalyst.
Yeah. So Catalyst is actually getting down to, what is the technical data about X piece of gear.
Okay.
And pubs are all the manuals that have to do with the gear. So anecdotally, from what I understand, the number of publications that are no longer required to be available on paper fill up about a warehouse. Wow. Rumor has it that Logcom was able to repurpose an entire warehouse because they didn't need to store the manuals anymore. It's now available. You got your
digitally.
You got your tablet. You have your TDM Catalyst, your TDM pubs, and so the Marine or the civilian maintainer can walk around with their laptop, or not their, they can walk around with a laptop, but with the mobile device, get the technical data that they need while they're standing next to the gear, rather than going back to the library, finding what they're hoping is the most up-to-date document. So there's a significant increase in just the effectiveness of the data that's available to the maintenance community.
It's like being able to just look something up online whenever you're trying to
on your phone.
fix something. Yeah.
On your phone, exactly. Like, how do I get down to this restaurant here? Let me call up my map on my phone, rather than do I even have the map of that area in my car?
Going to the library, pulling out a map.
Right, exactly. Very, very much old school. And then the other big effort that's in DE&I, and DE&I has several other things, is very exciting. It's called Logistics Data Services, all right? So you may hear a term called data lake.
I think,
yes. Yeah. We used to call them data repositories, but essentially LDS's mission is to provide authoritative, and I'm talking capital A, authoritative logistics data as a service. And that means that LDS is intentionally non-transactional. So locally, if you have low code, no code, I can build my app. I need to do this work, and I need a certain amount of authoritative logistics data in order to do the analysis that I'm doing locally. You can do that. And it doesn't make any difference to us, what application you're using, as long as, we make the application interfaces available and we do the interface agreements and that sort of thing. Once all of that's in place, the using unit can pull the authoritative data in, and they know that the analysis using logistics data is
it's accurate.
Exactly. And that's, and that's not just the system, that's the governance that goes behind it. So the organizations that actually own the data, including DLA, Logistics Command, and similar agencies like that, have given us the means by which we cleanse the data. We'd say, yes, this is authoritative. This is how often the data is updated and that sort of thing. These are your approved sources. So everything that we do along those lines gives the users a higher confidence that they're getting good authoritative data, at least for logistics. There's a lot of very good interest. almost too much to a certain degree. We've heard, well, the whole Marine Corps should be using LDS. Well, let's work.
Start with the logistics.
Start with logistics, and a finite set of logistics data users, and we build it on from there. So this is very exciting. It's absolutely the way the Marine Corps should be going.
Everybody loves data.
Yeah.
I mean, you can make informed decisions if you have all the data.
Right. And as a matter of fact, Jupiter and Advana are now being pointed to LDS instead of GCSS Marine Corps. That's a separate report that has to be put out and that sort of thing. So, and LDS does have GCSS data in it.
It takes it all.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then so as Jupiter and Advana use expands and refines and that sort of thing, at least from the login, they should be able to just pull right in from LDS and do that level of analytics that they need to do. And then the other group is called the tactical logistics systems. Those are the applications that are being used in the motor pools and the maintenance bays.
Okay.
To some degree on, flight lines and warehouses and things like that. But those are the day-to-day fleet marine users. So there's some transportation planning and capacity management. There's a little bit of a command and control capability there as well. So, and I don't mean full transportation command and control, right? So that would be commander specific information that they need from TCPT, and then and a warehousing capability as well, and that's called Stratus, and Stratus has an interface to GCSS. Yeah, so we're definitely putting some building blocks into getting to this fully integrated, if you will, what had been intended to be a single GCSS to what in the future should be what I'm calling a system of systems and services.
System of
systems and services. Yeah, potentially, just as simple as interfaces to, one of the capabilities that we won't be involved in, but we would have an interest in that they would be a customer is something called FARS, the Fuels Automated Reporting System, is undergoing a planned modernization, significant modernization. One of those requirements is logistics data, right?
Yeah.
So, we've been discussing that with the various folks at CDI about understand that somebody else will execute this program. However, we also understand that we need to be prepared to have them as a customer. So all these big chunks of movement. So recently, what we call the MLS2s, those systems I just talked about, those are the MagTaf logistics support systems. They were also web-based systems, et cetera. And we, over the last couple of years, went through a modernization activity that we called innovation. Just big I, innovation. They moved into the hybrid cloud services. The non-classified applications were in the initial planning for movement into AWS cloud as the Kansas City data center is preparing to move entirely into cloud services and that sort of thing. So we're involved in that. TLS also has another capability called telemetry, which came to us actually through the Small Business Innovative Research program.
Okay.
And telemetry is basically in-transit visibility. A truck leaves, we'll say, Albany with a load on it, and there's a tag on the truck that says this is truck ABC. It's, there are things called nano shouts that basically send signals out. And we can see when that truck left Albany and then when it checked in at various other places. So we can see where a load is approximately.
That's
when fully deployed, that's the capability that we'll have there as well. So so we've gotten it through its first paces, had our first authority to proceed set for full fielding. So there will be additions to the telemetry capability as we go forward and as funding is approved for it and that sort of thing. So
it's like in your personal life when you can track the package when it's gonna get to you.
Yeah. When you get, that's a really good analogy. You get the initial email from your vendor saying UPS has it, and then, UPS says it left our facility, right? It might say it left your facility yesterday and it's due at this place tomorrow. You don't know exactly where it is in between, but it's basically that level of information.
It gives you an idea of how long you're going to have to wait.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
That'll be really helpful.
Commanders definitely are, especially in the logistics and movement control and inventory folks. They definitely have been clamoring for that level of capability for quite some time. So, and small business came through, and yeah,
We love small business.
yes, we do.
Kind of ties into that because that makes me think of if we're having to take our gear from the States overseas, being able to track it, but also as we're looking to the future fight. And, logistics has become a big conversation of how are we going to get our equipment from point A to point B in these contested environments. Is that putting a challenge on the work you're doing at LI2S?
It's absolutely informing our priorities for sure. So when I was at the APBI brief with Modern Day Marine, you heard all of the program managers talk about logistics being a pacing function. Without accurate and available information, logistics becomes a lagging function. So the availability of logistics information is absolutely crucial to logistics being the pacing function in the fight. And logistics being a difference between winning and not winning that's not a new problem. You go back to studies of the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, supply lines are interrupted, et cetera. So in our world, that's why we're focusing on availability of these capabilities in denied and degraded environments. And that's why we're working on things like DDoMic log and email mobile query and mobile field services and things like that. So CD&I are working on an update to our capabilities-based assessment, revalidating the requirements that, the CDD, I think, dates back to about 2011. So almost all of those requirements will be revalidated, should give a little bit more shape as far as the operational environment that the capabilities would be used in, because that will greatly inform technologically how we meet those requirements. So, right now, a request for equipment or repair parts goes up to big GCSS in the sky, and then GCSS has the means to determine where a piece of gear or a repair part is to make it available. In a future environment, it would be nice to be able to, yes, you'll send the report to GCSS, but if you're in the fight and there's an asset maybe 100 miles away that we can reach out rather than waiting for GCSS when comms are potentially interrupted, right? So if there are other ways to reach out and do those transactions that way, and then make sure, as comms become available, the GCSS is updated, that would be, I'm assuming, a useful requirement.
Yes.
So, and I know it's been in the discussions, but, where it's going to be as far as priorities in the capabilities-based assessment remains to be seen. I think we're going to see a first draft.
In line with force design. We're getting closer and closer to 2030.
Yes, ma'am, we are. Yes, ma'am, we are. And GCSS, the system sunset date is 2035. So that's 11 years away. We need to be at the point where we have specific design plans in mind. That's why I'm saying things like system of systems and services. Let's think globally what's going on, because maybe not all of the capabilities would come through an LI2S program. Maybe it's an interface to another capability, and it makes more sense technically and financially maybe to leverage interfaces rather than wholesale new design.
Do we always set a sunset date for a system whenever we've built one?
That is a requirement for acquisition, yeah.
Okay.
I think it has as much to do with budget planning as anything else. I would be hard-pressed to say exactly this is why XYZ system has to be sunset, and it's not just information systems, all of your hardware, your platforms, your weapon systems, everything has a sunset date. Most systems live well beyond their sunset date. But, it helps in overall force planning and financial planning, technology planning, industry.
And technology is always updating.
Oh, especially
at the speed of light.
Especially in the information systems world, right? And, in the weapon systems platforms, aviation technology is continuing evolving.
We briefly talked about you working with other commands like LogCom.
Right.
Can you tell us more about who you work with daily or not daily?
Well, in general, all Marine Corps units that have equipment that needs to be maintained, repaired, inventoried, accounted for. They're all our customers.
Okay.
Right. So from the Grand Marine Corps sense, we have a couple of activities each year, one of which is what we call the Enterprise Configuration Control Board. Was initially set up specifically for GCS capabilities and giving the Fleet Marine users a chance to say, ask for improvements or changes or other capabilities through GCSS, the system. So we have those opportunities are twice a year for the Fleet Marines as a whole to come and say, this is what we need from these systems that are in our portfolio, and we jointly host that with us and with INL LP. So DCINL, specifically LP, so that's a one-star general pool responsible for Marine Corps Logistics. The other one, of course, responsible for Marine Corps installations. He's what's called our resource sponsor. He's the one that says, for Marine Corps Logistics, these are all the capabilities I need. And so the systems in my portfolio are part of his larger portfolio. And other commands, other organizations also have IT.
Yes.
Right. So we're not the only log IT game in town. We're the big ones, but they're also there as well. And so that we have regular working level interactions at all levels with INL. So mine are most often with a subgroup called LPI, and that's the portfolio managers. They're the ones that see all of the money that's being executed and planned and everything under General Pool's cognizance to make sure that what's being executed is in line with what his priorities are.
Yes.
Right? And in some cases, moving money around. Now, in order to be effective at that, you have to have a lot of working groups and a lot of collaboration, that kind of thing. And so I've spent a good portion of my time with the program office establishing those regular rhythms and the, what do we need to discuss, particularly when you're talking about POM cycles, when you're putting in budgets. So it's not just the program office, right? LogCom is one of the commands that you had mentioned there, right? They have their requirements in their budget that they're executing to as well. They have a data analytics office that they're setting up in order to meet some of General Pool's priorities and that sort of thing. And so we all work together collectively to put in the budget, the POM packages, to help inform
Everyone,
LP,
yeah.
Right, exactly, as far as where the shortfalls are. He has to make some priority decisions from time to time, yes on this and no on that. And so that's been, that's become very, very constructive and very, very successful. I think over the next couple of years, we'll have a little bit more formalized practices but just how we do business. Processes. Thank you. Yes. That's the word I was looking for. More formalized as we're getting ready for POM. These are the things we need to look at. Right now, they're just trying to get their arms around how many information systems they have in their purview, because they need to make some decisions as far as rationalizing, maybe what systems need to be stood down and that money sent to my portfolio, maybe to replace or incorporate or build out on. So there's a fair amount of effort putting there. And then the governance processes where the folks with generals on with stars on their shoulders can say, here's what the requirements are, and they decide collectively what happens there in the IT world. Yeah. So at my level, the most frequent, the most consistent interactions will be with LPI. LogCom is definitely growing because we've actually started working on them migrating one of their systems into LDS.
Okay.
And it looks like we will be able to replace almost all of that capability, except they have some transactional capability that we'll work through, making sure that they don't lose that as part of the migration. And then INL, as they, because they're our requirement sponsor, right? They approve or request a certain amount of money in order for my program office to deliver capabilities So they need to know, are we delivering? Was it enough money? Are there, like with audit, we were able to get General Pool's help in getting the word out that we needed the Fleet Marine Forces to help us with the audit reviews, the user account reviews, and that sort of thing. And so it's a very symbiotic kind of relationship.
We've heard a lot about LI2S, but now let's hear about you. Super excited.
What do you want to know? I'm an open book.
I believe you're the first person that I've ever met from Nebraska. So can you tell us a bit about your background and then how you ended up in Virginia?
So my background is I was actually born to a military family, but my dad retired when I was about 5. My mom was from Omaha, and so that was one of their possible, one of the places that he looked at and got a job with Honeywell. And that was actually where he worked until he retired 20 odd years later, retired as a civilian and that sort of thing. So I went to school entirely in Omaha, including my last 2 years of college. I went out of state for the first 2 years of college.
And then you went back?
And then, yeah. So I went to, I graduated from Creighton. I won't tell you how long ago that was. It was a couple of years. So I also had a desire to go in the military. So I joined ROTC at Creighton and got my commission out of there. And we also had family already here in Virginia, and that was at a time when, the economy and the housing market were really booming. They were visiting, my cousins were visiting over Christmas, and we're talking about, just really how many opportunities there were in the capital area. I had received word that I was going to be commissioned in the Army Reserves. So that meant I needed to find a full-time job. So I got my orders for my officer basic course at Fort Eustis, Virginia.
Okay.
And just decided that after the end of OBC that I would come up to the capital area. And I had a job within 2 weeks.
That's nice.
And then a couple of years later, I met the man who is now my husband. Started a family. And so I've been here since 1988.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been here for a couple of years.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
So what did you do in the reserves?
I was an Army transportation officer. It's interesting how things come full circle because the Transportation Corps insignia is a spearhead, and it's the spearhead of logistics.
Look at that.
Yeah, so transportation in the Army is air, ground, and water, not necessarily sea. Okay. But there was a time, I don't think this is true anymore, but there was a time when the Army had more watercraft than the Navy. So, and the Army watercraft is almost exclusively for transportation. So it's inland waterways. So that's where you have, you see the boats.
The rubber boats?
What's that?
Like the rubber type boats?
Well, those rubber boats, those might be the bridge boats that you're thinking of. Those are actually combat engineer boats where they can push bridge sections in and make temporary bridges where one may be needed or one may have been blown out and that sort of thing. But no, if all the old World War II movies with the landing craft with the ramps that drop.
Yes.
Yeah. Those were primarily to move equipment and cargo. So it was kind of, and then as a contractor and then a civilian, I worked more in the, supporting establishment end on the SIPRNet and the end user services and that kind of thing. To come back to an information system program office to be supporting logistics is kind of an interesting way that life sort of comes full circle there.
How did you decide to go into IT versus?
It was not a specific decision.
Okay.
It was just various projects that I had, so I was working primarily for Battelle, and it was just kind of, that's what Battelle was doing. And I was junior enough that they could hone my project management skills, and our customers were all IT customers. And so that's how I learned the business end of information technology planning and delivery.
And then the rest is history.
The rest is history, yeah. Yeah, so I came here as a contractor when something that the IT folks are familiar with, the Investment Review Board, was still being called the Business Management Modernization Program. Yeah.
I'm like,
that was a couple of years ago. So I was supporting the program office then in understanding some of how that was going to work. And then, after a couple of years, an opportunity became available, and here I am.
Here you are.
Here I am.
When you're not doing IT related and logistics related work, I heard that you can be seen with a guitar from time to time or a piano. I like to think that you walk around.
I don't walk around with a piano.
Maybe the ones that, that you can I don't know what it's called.
Oh, you're talking the little Casio keyboards?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything like that. Yes, I can be seen on a regular basis at St. Francis of Assisi Church with my guitar. And so a lot of my friends in Catholic school were playing guitar, and I thought, I could do that. And both of my parents were musically inclined. My dad played almost every brass instrument there was. And so he was always curious. And so I stumbled across a guitar that he had in his closet, and we had a songbook on the piano that had guitar chord diagrams. I can do that. And so I taught myself how to play the guitar. Now that my nest is pretty empty, looking at potentially, other venues, but I really enjoy it. I sing as well, and it's just sort of something that it is part of my service to my church community, but it's also, if I'm really stressed out or upset, sometimes just sitting down with the guitar or the piano or whatever just helps me focus that energy and kind of get my mind right again. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
I think it's time for us to do what we call the lightning round.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I guess.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Historical figure. Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
TV show, book, movie, or podcast you'd recommend?
TV show is Shrinking. Actually, a lot of what Apple is dishing up is excellent TV.
It is.
Yeah. And I'm just finishing, book-wise, I'm finishing a book called Hello, Beautiful. It's a story about complicated lives between sisters and moms. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, which is really ironic that I'm telling you this.
Maybe we'll change you and you'll start listening to podcasts.
So my movie answer will be controversial, potentially, but I really liked the Barbie movie.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, me too.
Do you have a favorite emoji that you always use?
Actually, because I text with my kids a lot, I use the blowing the kiss emoji.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
A song or a band that makes you happy?
A song or a band that makes me happy.
Or an individual artist, too.
So many. You just ask a musician that question, right? Right now, I've been singing the theme to the Barbie movie recently, but Bring Me to Life, good old Evanescence, epic rock anthem. Yeah, baby. And so Joan Jett, rock goddess, actually Heart in general, I've been focusing a lot of, women in rock and roll, Dire Straits and Mark Knopfler. I'm real guitar. I respond obviously to guitar heavy music. So, but that's not to say that just the classic rock gods and goddesses are all I'm listening. I think there's some really incredible music out right now. Imagine Dragons.
They're good.
Is way up on my list, and I'm a big Ed Sheeran fan. I think his songwriting is wonderful, and of course Adele is Adele.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. So
we'll have to chat more sometime.
Anytime. You know where to find me.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Equipping the Core. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform or on social media. We'd love to hear from you.